At a dusty rural auction in Texas, an old man quietly raised his hand and bought a skin-and-bone horse for just $50. What he didn't know, behind those weary eyes lay a shocking disappearance, a secret buried for 5 years, and a man who died to protect the truth. When Cliff Marlowe, the kingpin of horse racing, shows up asking to buy the horse back, that's when everything truly begins. The north wind rolled in with a quiet rain, lashing against the rusted tin roof of a small auction barn on the edge of Whitney, Texas. The roof trembled with each lonely gust, as if the sky were gently tapping on years long buried beneath the dust of old country roads. Inside, the dim light of aged filament bulbs cast a flickering glow over the soaked hay floor, where a starved Mustang stood motionless. It was chestnut-colored, its coat mottled and faded like time had worn away every strand. Its tangled mane hung low and wet against its neck, and its eyes saw no one. They stared blankly into a void where only the ashes of dreams remained. Outside the pen, a few older men leaned their elbows on the wooden railing, their sun-baked faces framed by rolled-up sleeves. They'd spent their lives around horses and had seen too many like this one, creatures cast aside once their worth ran dry. Their eyes swept past the animal, as if silently confirming, just another one nobody wants. The auctioneer, a wiry man with a wispy mustache named Virgil Dade, tapped his gavel on the wooden podium. His voice droned lazily through a crackling microphone. Up next, one unregistered Mustang, unknown age, no papers, opening at $50. Who'll start the bid? The barn fell silent. The wind hissed against the porch. A few light coughs echoed, then faded. The horse remained still. The straw beneath its hooves was soaked. Someone in the crowd snorted. Should have put him down a long time ago. At the far end of the barn, a man in a soft-worn cowboy hat sat with his head slightly bowed. He said nothing, only stroked his silver beard. His name was Bo Whitmore, 62, once a blacksmith, now the lone owner of a weathered ranch tucked along the Red Rock Hills of Southern Hill County. Bo hadn't planned to buy anything today. He'd come just to watch, to breathe in the scent of horse and hay, to hear again the iron-shod rhythm that had once been part of his soul. But something in the horse's eyes wouldn't let him walk away. Slowly, he raised his hand. 50, he said, voice deep and steady. A few heads turned. Someone scoffed. A younger man muttered to his friend, "Old man Whitmore's gone," and picked up another broken one. Virgil dropped the gavel. Sold to Mr. Whitmore, $50. The horse didn't react. Neither did Bo. He only nodded, then quietly stepped out toward the back lot, where his old trailer waited beneath the rain. The drive home took over 2 hours, winding through slick dirt roads and groves of wind-blown pine. Bo's battered pickup groaned like every bolt was straining against time. In the trailer behind, the horse remained silent. No whinny, no kick, no fight, just the soft, rhythmic clink of steel hooves against metal siding. Bo steered with one hand, the other resting on the cracked leather seat beside him. He didn't understand himself. His ranch was already short on everything: feed, hay, medicine, and he barely had the strength to care for what he had left. But something in the horse's gaze, it wasn't asking for rescue. It just needed someone to see it. One last time. Night had fully fallen when he reached the ranch. The old wooden gate creaked long and loud as he pushed it open. The ground was slick with red mud. He backed the truck into the rear corral, cut the engine, and stood still for a moment in the fading rain. Bo stepped out of the cab, pulling his hat low. The wind sliced across his face. He opened the trailer, tied a lead, and slowly lowered the ramp. The horse didn't move. It stood so long Bo thought it might be too weak to walk, but then it lifted one hoof, then the other, slow, deliberate, as if measuring every inch it left behind in this world. Bo watched without blinking. In the yellow barn light, the horse's body became clear. Long scars across its sides, faded patches of fur, and a faint white stripe running down its forehead. But what struck him was the way it walked. Steady, in control, not trembling, like an old athlete who still held on to dignity in every step. "Lucky the sky let you live this long," Bo muttered, patting its neck gently. The horse flinched, not from fear. It felt more like expectation. He led it into the left stall, empty since his mare had died the previous spring. The scent of dry hay, rotting wood, and rain merged into something achingly familiar. Bo filled the water trough, watching as the horse dipped its head and drank slowly. Not frantic, not desperate, like it knew the water wasn't going anywhere. "So who the hell are you, old friend?" Bo asked, his voice scratchy like scorched wood. "Who left you behind, and why?" The horse didn't answer, of course, but it looked at him, long and deep. As Bo turned to close the stall gate, the barn light angled across the horse's left side and froze him in place. Beneath layers of dried mud, something strange peeked through. He knelt, wiped at it. The dirt flaked away, a scar. No, an old brand, faded and buried in grime. He scraped again, it became clearer. A black arrow piercing a crescent moon. Bo stepped back, his chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. That mark. No matter how many years had passed, no matter how hard he'd tried to forget, it was burned into him. The brand of Marlow Ridge Stables. And with it came everything Bo had sworn he'd never touch again. The morning came late. The sky hung heavy and gray, like a wool blanket draped over the hills and empty fields. A thin fog drifted low across the pastures, clinging to the ridges in the distance. On the barn's rooftop, a handful of sparrows perched on the wooden beams, chirping as if whispering secrets no human could yet understand. Bo Whitmore leaned against the barn wall, a steaming mug of coffee in hand. The warmth did nothing for the chill in his chest. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, that image reappeared. A black arrow through a crescent moon. An old brand he knew all too well, one that once belonged to a place the whole state of Texas called the Cathedral of Racehorses, Marlow Ridge. Bo had set foot there once. Years ago, when he was young and foolish, he'd taken a horse he had shoed with his own hands up to Ridge Hill, hoping to get hired. But it didn't take long for him to understand. Marlow Ridge wasn't a place for men who lived by faith. Horses there weren't companions, they were tools. Currency. And if they didn't run fast enough, they were erased. He set the mug on the stall gate. The chestnut horse, its coat now dry, stood motionless near the hay trough. In the daylight, Bo could see what he hadn't caught the night before. Scars crisscrossing both rear legs, a small cut near the shoulder, and eyes as dark as the muddy Brazos River. A Mustang, once owned by Marlow Ridge? That didn't add up. The Ridge never used wild horses. They bred thoroughbreds, pure lines, pedigrees tracked over 3 generations. Bo unlatched the stall door and stepped inside. The horse turned its head slightly but didn't back away. He placed a hand on its neck, then ran his fingers down its left flank. The brand was still there. Bo shuddered. "This can't be," he whispered, then turned and strode quickly toward his storage shed. The shed was a cluttered mess. 3 decades of life stacked on shelves and scattered across tables. Old saddles, blacksmith tools, broken anvils, rope coils, bird cages, cracked boards, and one large wooden trunk covered by a tarp in the corner. He pulled it out, dusted it off, and pried open the lid. Inside was a chaotic trove of old notebooks, race journals, horse magazines, ink-stained scribbles, and yellowed newspaper clippings. Bo had once been obsessed, documenting every promising bloodline, every memorable race he'd seen, even on television. In his youth, he dreamed of running a small horse sanctuary, one without whips, where trust came first. But life had other plans. He rifled through the chaos like a man chasing a half-remembered dream. A brittle sheet slipped from a brown notebook. It was an old photograph. A chestnut stallion, sleek, tall, with a flowing mane and a thin white blaze down its forehead. Underneath the photo, printed in faded ink, Blue Fire, sired by Majestic Riot, owned by Marlow Ridge Stables. Bo exhaled sharply. His hand clenched the picture like it might disappear. Blue Fire. He remembered that name. The whole state remembered. A racehorse sensation 4, maybe 5 years ago, winner of 3 major races in Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. They called him the horse from behind, always surging to the front in the final stretch. Then one day, he vanished. No explanation. Media claimed injury. Some blogs said he was sold off to Mexico. Others whispered about doping scandals. But all of it was shut down fast. Blue Fire. Bo repeated under his breath. A name both foreign and familiar. If the horse in his stall was Blue Fire, who had dumped him at a backwoods auction like a piece of junk, and who had enough power to erase a creature like that from history? By noon, Bo stood by his landline, a rotary phone still anchored to the wall like a relic of a past that refused to die. He dialed the number from memory. 3 rings. Then a gravelly voice answered. "Don't tell me you're stuck on the roof again, Bo." Bo chuckled faintly. Hank Brody, I think you'll want to see this. Last time you said that, I nearly got stunned by a swarm of hornets. This time it's a horse. One you trained. Silence. Don't screw with me, Bo. I'm not. Marlowe Ridge brand. White blaze on the forehead. Moves like he's dancing. I think it's him. Lord Almighty? Blue fire? Bo said nothing. On the other end, silence stretched. I'll be there in an hour, Hank said abruptly, then hung up. Hank Brody's pickup wasn't in much better shape than Bo's. It wheezed up the ranch driveway like an asthmatic bull. Hank stepped out, adjusted his hat, and spat tobacco into the brush. For your sake, this better not be a busted-legged mule, he muttered. Bo pointed toward the barn. See for yourself. Hank approached, eyes sharper than his years would suggest. His once strong arms sagged a bit now, but his presence was unmistakable, like a man who could command 100 horses with just a stare. When Bluefire lifted his head, both men went still. Son of a gun, it's him. Hank stepped forward, placed a hand on the horse's forehead, then ran it along the neck. Good God, Bo, this is Bluefire. I trained his stride when he was 2 years old. He remembers me. The horse tilted its head, gently pressing its brow to Hank's chest. Then how the hell did he end up here? Bo asked. Who left him? And why? Hank stepped back, his eyes darkening. Because, he said quietly, someone wanted him gone. Bo swallowed hard. And if they find out he's still alive, Hank added, they won't let it stay that way. The next morning cracked open beneath a pale gray light. Rain still clung to the world, tiny droplets sliding down the foggy window of Bo Whitmore's kitchen, like remnants of a dream not yet shaken off. He sat quietly at his old wooden table, a mug of bitter black coffee in his hand. On the table lay a faded photograph of Bluefire from his glory days, beside a scrap of paper Bo had scribbled the night before. If I go missing, it wasn't an accident. Hank Brody stood by the kitchen counter, unscrewing a small whiskey flask and adding a splash to his own coffee. Little early for last words, ain't it? He muttered. We're not dead yet. Bo didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the waterlogged field out behind the barn, where Bluefire moved in slow, deliberate steps. Controlled, measured, and yet each hoof print left a deep impression in the mud. You think he remembers? Bo asked quietly. Remembers what? What he saw, what made him disappear. Hank didn't reply right away. After a moment he said, I think some horses are smarter than we give them credit for, not because they talk, but because they watch and they never forget. The distant rumble of an engine pulled both men from their thoughts. Bo stood, parted the curtain, and looked toward the front gate. A sleek black SUV with no license plate crept along the muddy road toward the ranch. That ain't the mailman, Hank muttered, his voice dropping. The SUV came to a stop outside the porch. 2 men stepped out. The first was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal wool overcoat over a crisp white shirt, his polished leather shoes gleaming defiantly in the mud. The second was shorter, with a buzz cut and eyes sharp as broken glass. His gaze swept the ranch like he already knew what he was looking for. Bo opened the door before they could knock. What's this about? He asked flatly, eyes locked on the taller man. The man smiled, a polite expression devoid of warmth. He reached into his coat and produced a thin leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a silver horsehead insignia. Cliff Marlowe, he said. I run Marlowe Ridge Stables. The name hung in the air like a blade. Hank tensed beside Bo, stepping into view. I don't take walk-ins, Bo replied, voice calm but cold. Cliff kept smiling, as if he hadn't heard. We heard you picked up a horse at the Whitney auction, he said smoothly. A very particular one. And you care because? Bo asked, arms folding across his chest. Cliff's eyes drifted toward the wet pasture, where Bluefire stood at a distance. Because I believe that horse once belonged to our stables. He went missing a few years back. A real tragedy. But if he's been found, we'd be more than happy to buy him back for a fair price. How fair? Hank asked. Cliff turned toward him, raising an eyebrow. 20 times what you paid. 30 if you don't ask any more questions. Bo shook his head. I didn't bring him home for the money. Cliff stopped smiling. The air shifted, like a quiet storm had crept up the porch stairs. You know, he said softly, some stories are better left buried. The past has a way of staying down when no one goes digging. Or maybe it's just been drowned, Hank said coldly. The shorter man stepped forward, silent until now. He moved closer to Bo, eyes locked in, "You might want to be careful about what you keep in that barn, Mr. Whitmore," he said in a voice as hard as gravel. "Some things can keep a man awake at night." "Then I'll leave the light on," Bo replied. Silence. Only the faint squeak of boots in the mud and the hush of a threat still unspoken. Cliff reached into his coat and pulled out a business card, placing it on the porch railing. "When you're ready to talk, really talk, give me a call." Then he turned and walked away. Both men climbed back into the SUV. It pulled away as silently as it had arrived, smooth, measured, and entirely calculated. After the vehicle disappeared behind the willow trees, Hank looked at Bo. "He knows exactly where the horse is. He didn't come to buy him back, he came to measure the risk." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if he thinks you'll stay quiet, he'll throw money at you. But if you push back, he'll make it disappear. Another fire, another accident, another missing man." Bo's gaze drifted toward the barn. Bluefire stood under the tree canopy, head slightly bowed, as if he already knew he'd been marked again. "What do we do now?" Bo asked. "We start digging," Hank said. "And this time, no one gets to bury the truth." The sky over Hill County stayed dark for 3 days straight, as if even the weather were hesitating, caught between the cold of winter and the weight of truth. A soft drizzle lingered, not enough to loosen the ground, just enough to seep into your bones and hang in your clothes like a warning. The horse barn behind the Whitmore Ranch sat in silence, broken only by the steady breathing of Bluefire and the wind whispering through rotten boards. Inside the small kitchen, Bo Whitmore and Hank Brody sat across from each other, each nursing a mug of black coffee. In the middle of the table sat Bo's old laptop, rarely used, now opened with reverence. Scattered around it were scribbled notes, race records, and printed articles dating back to 2017, the year Bluefire vanished from the racing world as if he'd never existed. Hank pecked at the keyboard with his index finger, each keystroke sounding like a landmine being disarmed. Bluefire, disappearance, Marlow Ridge, Midwest Derby. He muttered each word like a prayer, eyes never leaving the screen. The first page of results was full of familiar headlines. Racing star Bluefire withdraws last minute due to knee injury. Marlow Ridge horse suffers setback, no comments from owner. A short-lived story for the come-from-behind champion. Each article sounded the same, as if written by the same hand. Calming phrases repeated themselves, nothing unusual, at the owner's discretion, on medical rest. Bo furrowed his brow. "Feels like someone copy-pasted a cover story." "Not just wrote it," Hank replied. "They scrubbed everything else." After 3 long hours of combing forums, archives, old image sites, and backdoor blogs, Hank paused on the 17th page of an old search engine. "Wait, this one's different," he said, hovering over a plain, overlooked headline buried among digital rubble. "The night Bluefire vanished, what really happened?" Posted by rayquin1972@gmail.com. Date, April 14, 2018, 4 days after Bluefire was officially injured and retired. Bo leaned in. The webpage was clunky, overloaded with blinking ads. But the text was crystal clear. "My name is Ray Quinn. I used to work as a tech in the injury unit at Marlow Ridge. I don't work there anymore, and after I post this, I'm not sure where I'll be. That night, I was on the graveyard shift. I heard shouting from stall 4, where they kept Bluefire. Cliff Marlowe and another man. I couldn't see who, but I heard them. They mentioned wrong dosage, we can't let it affect the race results, and if this gets out, we're dead." I didn't see the other guy's face, but afterward, Bluefire was taken out of the facility. No vet, no ambulance, just a truck with no plates. At 3 a.m. the next morning, I was let go. Loss of confidence was the reason. No one gave the real one. I don't know what they did to the horse, but I know this, he wasn't injured, he was silenced. And if I disappear, you'll know why. Bo read the last line, then sat still for a long while. The kitchen seemed to freeze. Even the fireplace stopped creaking. Hank scratched his head. "Ray Quinn, that name rings a bell." "You knew him?" "No, but there's a girl near the border, works at a small animal clinic. They call her Tessa. Tessa Quinn, might be his daughter." Bo didn't say anything. He turned toward the window, looking out across the wet pasture where Bluefire stood alone, like a weary old soldier still standing guard in a war no one remembers. "You think he's still alive?" Bo asked. "Ray? No idea, but if his daughter's alive, maybe she's holding on to something Marlow Ridge didn't manage to burn." The next day, they drove nearly 100 miles of red dirt back roads to reach Rio Hollow, a quiet town near the New Mexico border, where a small veterinary clinic called South Draw Veterinary stood tucked between cottonwoods. No one inside recognized the name Ray Quinn. But when Bo pulled out a printed copy of the blog post, a young woman with dark hair and tired eyes stepped out of the back room. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her cheekbones sharp, her eyes lined with exhaustion, but her presence unwavering. "I'm Tessa," she said flatly. "Where did you get that?" Bo and Hank exchanged a glance. "We're not here to stir trouble," Bo said. "We came because of Bluefire." Tessa's body stiffened. Then quietly she asked, "He's alive?" Bo nodded. Tessa turned away. Her eyes were suddenly wet. "My father, he always said that if something ever happened, find the people who still remember Bluefire." Hank stepped forward. "Do you have anything? Any proof about what happened that night?" She gave a faint nod. Unzipping her backpack, she pulled out a small red USB drive sealed in a waterproof bag. "My dad hid this in the dog's food bin. I found it after he passed. I never opened it. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I knew if I did, there'd be no turning back." Bo took the drive, feeling the weight of it like an unexploded round. "We can't turn back either," he said. The borderlands turned to dusk early. The last slivers of sunlight kissed the ridgelines in the distance, painting them with a tired, golden glow, like the final breath of a fading day. On the wooden kitchen table, the red USB drive sat motionless between the three of them, a tiny stick of dynamite waiting for someone to pull the pin. Tessa Quinn sat with her arms folded tight. Her eyes were sunken but sharp, her face unreadable, hardened not by years, but by loss. She didn't talk much. She didn't need to. Every inch of her spoke the quiet, cold language of someone who had already lost too much and had nothing left to lose. "My father always said," she began slowly, "if that horse is still alive, it's the only witness left." Hank gave a slight nod. "And what's on that USB?" Tessa removed the cap and plugged it into Bo's laptop. The screen blinked, then lit up with a single folder labeled Midwest Derby Backup. Inside it was just one file, footage 3 a.m., cam4.mp4. The three of them exchanged a glance. Bew inhaled deep and hit play. The footage was grainy black and white. A ceiling-mounted security cam panned over the hallway outside Stall 4 at Marlow Ridge. A timestamp glowed in the corner, 0:32 a.m. of 4/4/2018. Ray Quinn appeared first, clipboard in hand, head down, taking notes. Then a second figure stepped into frame, tall, broad, walking with authority. Cliff Marlowe. No sound, but the images told plenty. The two men argued. Cliff pointed aggressively at Stall 4. Ray shook his head and raised the clipboard in protest. Then, without warning, Cliff lunged. A shove. Ray staggered out of frame, disappearing behind the wall's blind corner. Cliff stood still for a few seconds, then looked around and walked away. Another figure, face obscured, entered from the opposite direction. Together, they dragged something long and heavy, likely Ray's body, down the corridor, out of sight. The screen went black. No one in the room spoke. "My dad didn't fall off a ladder in the barn like Cliff claimed," Tessa whispered, voice trembling. "He was murdered, and they thought he left nothing behind." Bo rose from the table and stepped onto the porch. The wind of dusk swept over the ranch, carrying red dust and silence. Out in the pasture, Bluefire raised his head, ears perked, eyes locked on the front gate. Bo frowned. "I think someone's coming." A sudden crash shattered the kitchen window. Glass exploded inward like a spray of ice. "Down!" Hank shouted, grabbing Tessa and pulling her to the floor. Bo dove beside them. Another gunshot cracked, punching a hole through the wooden wall and spraying splinters across the room. "They found her!" Hank yelled. "Out to the barn!" Bo roared. "We can't hold this place." Tessa followed the two men out the back, slipping in the mud as they sprinted toward the stables. Bluefire startled, but when he saw Bo, he didn't retreat. He stood ready. No saddles, no bridles, no time. Bo swung up onto the horse with a clean motion and reached down to pull Tessa behind him. Hank threw open the stall for his old gelding, Whiskey, a gray-coated, short-legged brute with the stubbornness of steel, and vaulted into the saddle. "Go!" Bo shouted, kicking his heels against Bluefire's flank. The Mustang exploded into motion, hooves pounding the wet earth, tearing across the pasture as bullets cracked in the air behind them. Two black SUVs burst from the tree line. Headlights blazed. Engines howled like hunting dogs off the leash. Another shot rang out. Splinters flew from a fence post inches from Beau's leg. "Head for the river," Hank hollered. "West Bridge." Bluefire led, unfaltering. The wind howled in Beau's face. Behind him, Tessa clung tightly, her head buried in his back. Whiskey followed close, Hank gritting his teeth, leaning forward to balance through the rush. The SUVs roared behind them, headlights swerving through curves, tires slinging mud. A bullet slammed into a tree trunk, sending bark flying. But Bluefire didn't stop. He charged down the hillside, through brush and bramble, eyes locked ahead like he could still see the finish line. Then the bridge came into view. A long, narrow stretch of aging wood spanning the swollen Rio. "It'll collapse," Tessa screamed. "We die if we stop," Beau shouted. Bluefire galloped up the bridge. Boards groaned beneath him, some splintering with each step. Whiskey charged close behind, Hank leaning hard into the reins. One SUV skidded to a stop at the riverbank. A man stepped out and raised a gun, but slipped in the mud, tumbling face first with a curse. The horses reached the other side. A cracking boom thundered behind them. The bridge gave out. A large section dropped into the river below. Broken wood, rope, and debris splashed into the muddy current. The SUVs sat stranded on the far side. Beau pulled the reins. Bluefire stopped, chest heaving, eyes burning. Tessa slid off, legs shaky, breath catching in her throat. Hank came up beside them, breathing hard, eyes still scanning the darkness behind. A long silence. Tessa dropped to the dirt, shaking. They can't follow now. Beau stroked Bluefire's neck. The horse stood tall, ears flicking, still staring back, as if ready to face them again. "We have proof," Hank said. "And now, we have a chance." Beau gazed at the fading horizon, shadows long on the ground. "Then it's time," he said, "to finish what Ray Quinn started." Night winds swept across the Rio like a whisper of warning. The river ran high and wild, muddy and angry from days of relentless rain. Under the thin crescent moon, the waves slapped against the red clay banks, sounding almost like footsteps. Slow, steady, getting closer. Across the broken river span, the growl of engines still echoed, low, restless, and full of frustration. Cliff Marlowe's black SUV sat motionless, stranded on the far side by the same rickety bridge he had once refused to replace in his plan to upgrade the racing trail. Now, it was the only thing standing between him and 3 fugitives, plus one living, breathing secret. Beau's hands gently tugged the reins. His palm rested against Bluefire's neck. The horse trembled, not from fear, but from knowing it had just done something that couldn't be repeated. Hank Brody climbed off Whiskey. His coat was streaked with blood and mud. A gash on his left arm still dripped slowly, courtesy of a low-hanging branch that hadn't gotten the memo they were running for their lives. Tessa Quinn sat slumped on the riverbank, shivering, pale and hollow-eyed from adrenaline and shock. "They can't cross," Hank exhaled. "The bridge is gone." "They won't turn back either," Beau replied, eyes fixed on the SUV's headlights glowing across the river. "Cliff doesn't know how to lose." Tessa gave a dry, bitter laugh. "He killed my father just to hide a horse. Now that we've got that video, he won't just kill again, he'll destroy." They built a small fire beneath a wide oak near the river's edge. Hank started it with a bundle of dried grass he'd stuffed in his coat. His hands shook, not just from cold, but from knowing they'd lit a match under the very foundation of everything Marlowe Ridge tried to bury. Tessa handed Beau the USB. He tucked it into a leather pouch and tied it to his belt. "Guard this like your life," she said, "because that's what it is, the only thing left that the law might still listen to." Beau nodded slowly. "But it's not enough." "Not enough?" She blinked. "We need someone to stand with us. The local cops, Cliff owns them. The papers, he silenced them years ago. But there are still places he can't reach. The internet, the people, the ones who still remember Ray Quinn." Hank looked up. "So what are you saying?" "I know an independent news outlet. A friend of mine used to work there. We send the video to them. But first," he pointed toward the North Ridge, "we need a signal." Tessa's eyes lit. "There's an old ranger tower on the ridge, abandoned, but the signal's strong." "How far?" 20 miles, through forest," Hank groaned. "I used to hike that kind of trail when I was 20. Now I'm winded crossing the pasture." "I'll go," Tessa said quickly, determination hardening in her eyes. "No," Beau shook his head. "We go together. Bluefire can get us there before sunup." "And me?" Hank asked. You stay here. Keep the fire going. Make Cliff think we're still camped out. If things go bad, stall him. Hank smirked. So I'm the bait. Bo gripped his shoulder. There's no one better for the job. They said nothing else. The moon climbed higher, casting pale silver across the trees. Somewhere overhead an owl let out a hollow cry, like a warning only nature could understand. Before leaving, Bo approached Bluefire. No saddle, no bridle, just trust. We're running again, old man, he whispered. The horse dipped its head, hoof tapping the dirt. Ready. Tessa climbed on behind, arms wrapped tight around Bo's waist. They vanished into the night like a spear through the veil of fog. The forest at night wasn't for the faint of heart. Branches scratched like claws. Brambles hissed beneath the hooves. Mud sucked at their path like the earth itself wanted to pull them under. But Bluefire didn't stop. His muscles remembered the rhythm, the same cadence that once drove him down the final stretch of glory. Tessa leaned close to Bo's back. Did you ever imagine you'd be riding through the woods on a horse for justice? Bo let out a dry chuckle. I always figured I'd die in my sleep, but life rarely gives us the death we want. As they neared the ridge's peak, a clearing opened up. In the distance, the Firewatch Tower stood alone, silhouetted against the sky like an old soldier refusing to fall. Its steel antenna still intact, still reaching. Bo tied Bluefire to a post and stroked his mane. Stay close, we'll be back. They climbed the rickety stairs. On the second level, they found a solar battery still humming, a miracle after all these years. Just enough juice to power the laptop. The screen flickered. Then, connection. Bo dragged the video file into the upload window. Sending, 12%, 42%, 87%. Tessa gripped the railing, eyes wide. It's going. Then, a sound behind the tower, flashlight beams, crunching gravel. They're here, Tessa cried. Bo slammed the laptop shut and stuffed it into his bag. To the horse! They flew down the stairs as a gunshot shattered the top deck. Splinters exploded. Tessa screamed. Bluefire reared, ears pinned back, nostrils flaring. He waited. Bo threw the reins free. Tessa swung up behind. They took off as another bullet sliced the air. One SUV flanked from the east, headlights slicing through trees. They knew we'd head here, Bo muttered. Then, another SUV blocked the base of the hill. They're trying to box us in, Tessa yelled. Bo looked around. No trails left, just thick trees and a shallow ravine. And beyond that, a bridge. No, not a bridge. The bridge, the last one. Rotting timbers, warped beams barely standing. We can't, Tessa started. Bo looked into Bluefire's eyes, then said, We can. He nudged his heels. Bluefire surged forward. The bridge groaned with every step. Boards cracked, nails shrieked, halfway. Then 3/4, a loud snap, a plank broke loose. Tessa screamed. Then, Bluefire jumped. One breathless second of flight. No ground, no sky, just gravity. Then, hooves hit solid earth. They landed. Behind them the bridge collapsed, splintering into the ravine like a curse swallowed by the land. Tessa sobbed into Bo's coat. Bluefire stood tall, flanks heaving, sweat glistening like fire under moonlight. Across the chasm, Cliff Marlowe's SUV skidded to a stop. He stepped out, eyes narrowed, helpless. He stared across the void, not at Bo, not at Tessa, not even at Bluefire, but at the truth he couldn't catch. And he knew. He had lost. 4 days after crossing the broken bridge, the video showing Cliff Marlowe shoving Ray Quinn out of frame had spread like wildfire across underground forums, equestrian networks, racing subreddits, and every social media group where horse lovers still remembered the name Bluefire. And then, another name emerged. Ray Quinn. Once dismissed as the drunk vet who slipped in the barn, now revealed as a man who died quietly for daring to stand against a rotting empire. In the weathered kitchen of the Whitmore Ranch, Bo sat before his laptop when the call came in. On screen was the face of Gloria Reyes, a seasoned investigative journalist with the Dustline Report, an independent outlet known for going where no mainstream media dared. Her voice was steady, firm, but carried the weight of compassion. We've confirmed it, she said. The footage is authentic, timecodes match. The camera was part of Marlowe Ridge's internal system. A former staffer just identified Cliff Marlowe's voice from the audio. Bo nodded. What happens now? Gloria hesitated. We'll air the full segment in 3 days. But Cliff has a powerful legal team. We need more than just video to make it stick. I've got one more thing, Bo said. He reached for an old folder. Inside was a copy of Ray Quinn's handwritten medical logs, found by Tessa in a crate of forgotten belongings. It detailed injection records, medications used, and dates, none of which were ever disclosed to regulators. "If you put this next to the footage," Bo said, "Marlow Ridge goes up in flames." Gloria smiled. "You don't know what you've done." That evening, Tessa sat alone on the barn steps, staring out into the open pasture. In her hands was a faded photo of her father standing next to a younger Bluefire, his mane long, his eyes proud, his hooves still clean from glory. Bo walked up, holding 2 steaming mugs of hot cocoa. He handed her one, then sat beside her. "I never thanked you," she said softly. "You don't need to," Bo answered. "This isn't about me or your dad. It's about the truth." After a long pause, she asked, "What are we going to do with Bluefire?" Bo glanced toward the moonlit field. Bluefire stood grazing under a silver sky, his chestnut coat shimmering like embers in the dark. "We're not going to do anything," he said. "We're going to let him go." Tessa looked over sharply. "You mean it? That horse ran his whole life for others, for owners, for trophies, for people who used him. Now he gets to run for himself." The next morning, they untied the lead rope, opened the gate, and led Bluefire beyond the fence line. Bo stood before him, placing a hand on the old stallion's forehead one last time. "Thank you, old boy, for not forgetting, for not staying quiet." Bluefire didn't whinny, didn't stomp. He just looked at Bo, deep and silent, and then turned. Step by step, he walked into the open field. Never looked back, didn't need a lead, didn't need permission, just freedom. 10 days later, Cliff Marlowe was arrested at Amarillo International Airport, moments before boarding a flight to Dubai. The video had gone too far, too fast. Public outcry was deafening. A state investigation was opened, his stables were shuttered, his license revoked indefinitely. At the press conference, a spokesperson for the investigation said, "We're reviewing a number of so-called accidental deaths at Marlow Ridge over the last 15 years. Bo didn't attend the press conference. He stood in the middle of his pasture in Hill County, where spring sun was cracking the red earth and the old fences still leaned with age, but his heart had never felt lighter. Hank was busy fitting a new halter for a young colt. Whiskey had finally retired. Hank said he planned to teach the neighborhood kids how to care for horses, not for racing, but for understanding. Tessa was packing up, heading back to Amarillo. She'd accepted a job at a wild horse rescue nonprofit. "I used to think I was born to heal," she said. "Turns out I was born to bear witness." Bo hugged her like a father would a daughter. Just before leaving, she asked him, "What if Bluefire never comes back?" Bo smiled. "He doesn't need to. I just need to know he's out there." As the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Bo walked alone to the highest rise behind the ranch, a place he used to sit as a boy, staring at stars, dreaming of a different life. He pulled from his coat an old photo, Bluefire, regal and defiant in the days when the world still believed in him. Beneath the photo, Bo had scrawled a single line in pen, "Truth doesn't need belief, it only needs to survive." He placed it inside a tin box, buried it at the foot of the hill, and stood. Then turned and walked back down the slope. Behind him, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the breath of a horse once forgotten, and now remembered by the world. If you believe that some creatures weren't born just to run, but to speak the truths we humans try to bury, drop a 1 in the comments below. If you've ever witnessed a moment where an animal saved a soul, leave a 0. And if the journey of Bo and Bluefire made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories where loyalty, truth, and silent love still live on through the steady hooves of a wild Mustang across the American land.